Change the screen. Can you give me permission to share again?
Yep.
Still not able to see my notes like I wanted to. It's all right. I've been talking about Gold Creek for a long time. I should be all right. Hi, everybody. Thanks. I'm very pleased to present to you the Gold Creek River Restoration Project. We're primarily with our surfboard project. We're primarily focusing on river mile 2 to 3, and I'll get into that later. Yeah, my name is Mitch with Kittitas Conservation Trust, and been 11 years in the making, and we're really happy to be at a place where we're actually asking for implementation funding on Gold Creek. How come it's not? It's progressing on my screen, but not here. Oh, there it is. So Gold Creek has had a rich history. Prior to European settlement, it was a old growth forested floodplain. Gold Creek supported large numbers of anadromous fish, the usual custom places.
Which Gold Creek is this? Where geographically?
Gold Creek, it's at the top of the pass, and feeds into Kittitas Reservoir.
That one, okay.
Yeah, not your Gold Creek.
Catchless.
Sorry, I made some assumptions that I thought people knew what it was, but yes, we're at the headwaters of the Upper Yakima Basin, feeding into Kittitas. But the usual customs places document that was put out by the tribe has accounting of fish being stacked, spring chinook in particular being stacked as high as a man's head like cordwood next to their smoke shacks that were in Gold Creek. It was because of that there was a thriving population of native fish species, including bull trout. So move forward a little bit, European settlement, a dam was put in place, catchless turned from a lake to a reservoir, blocking upstream and downstream migration for fish, genetically isolating a genetically specific population of bull trout behind the dam, and eliminating the anadromous fish runs that used to feed those fish. As well, other things, development such as transportation infrastructure, I-90, and development within the floodplain itself have limited that habitat. And I've kind of circled that 2011 on the right. We call this kind of that beginning of the age of diagnosis and healing of Gold Creek, because that's what we've been doing. We've been diagnosing the problem, and now we're moving forward to actually implementing those actions that were recommended through our 11, 12-year journey working in Gold Creek, trying to understand its problems and how to fix it so we can actually help these bull trout. Why is it important? So this is a very distinct population of bull trout. We've been looking at reds, well, not we, but we as in the royal we of all of our partners have been looking at Gold Creek and monitoring reds for almost 40 years now. It's probably one of the most well-documented creeks and tributaries that support bull trout spawning, at least in the Upper Yakima Basin, if not Washington State. But you kind of see this descending trend line from about the mid-90s to 2022. And so right now we're estimating the adult spawner population that resides in Catchless Reservoir is probably between 50 and 100 adults. And that's very concerning. So this is just showing the work that's been done to date by KCT, the things that we've done. There's been a lot of other efforts, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But you know, in general, there's been about $1.7 billion to date that's been invested in the assessment of the problems at Gold Creek, designing conceptual designs, working with stakeholders, getting us to where we're at now with the in-stream at 60%. Our other actions are at 30%, and also dealing with the permitting. Right now, we have consultants that are helping us work with the Forest Service to get through the NEPA process, which includes SEPA, cultural resources, and our water quality permitting. But there's been a lot of work and investment that's been put into Gold Creek to date, and we'd like to see that investment actually go on the ground instead of making paper. We'd like to actually start putting that in the ground. So one of the big limiting factors in Gold Creek is annual dewatering. So Gold Creek, between River Mile 1 and 2 approximately, it annually dewaters every year. Primary reason for that dewatering and function of that is the construction of the Gold Creek gravel pit, now called Gold Creek Pond, which remains in the valley. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then there's other subsequent gravel pits that have been put in place in this valley for getting aggregate for roads and other things. This dewatering usually starts near the end of July, going through until mid-September, October, depending on the fall rains. This is the exact time when adult fish are trying to make it up into the headwaters about 5.5 miles up to go spawn. And so it either blocks their passage or they get trapped in this reach. Either way, they're still holding in the lower portions of the creek. They're subject to predation and other disturbances from humans. And it causes a large number of mortality for the adults as well as for the young that are in these areas. As they move their way down, they get stuck in these very oversimplified creek channel, and when the water goes away, the fish end up dying. So this is an aerial photo of Gold Creek in 1944. This is probably our closest image of pretty major disturbances in the creek. As you can see, we've got a pretty dense forest, a narrow channel that branches and moves all over the place. There is the outline in peach of Gold Creek Pond. Looking at that, when we were looking at that aerial photo, it really represented itself as historically as a forested wetland feature that probably provided a lot of benefit to flow and habitat in Gold Creek, as well as maintaining cold, clean water. Then the smaller one indicates where Helly's Pond was, and Helly's Pond was constructed on what was once the main stem of Gold Creek before other disturbance that has occurred. So this is an aerial photo from 1957. This is back in the day when forest practices meant you could log right up to the creek. You could also use the drying and the creek at low flow, use that creek bed as a transportation route to move equipment and logs out. And the one thing to note here is shortly after logging was done, we think there was a pretty big flood event that happened, and it really avulsed the creek away from Helly's Pond and really simplified that creek channel. And the other thing that it did was drastically destabilize that creek bank. So the 1944 air photos, we're looking at active channel width on average of about 96 feet. And as we go down in time, we see that creek channel continuing to expand because we didn't have the old growth trees that created that bank stability. So the creek, it's the headwaters of the Yakima Basin. Gold Creek is the biggest watershed in the Kittitas Reservoir. This is actually should be called the Yakima River. And it has a lot of flashy force, particularly in spring high flows and also flood events that happen in the fall and winter with the pineapple expresses that come through. But what happens when you lose all that stability? The creek acts like a fire hose that nobody's holding on to and just continues to over widen that creek channel. And I've got another. So this is a graph from our assessment work back in 2012. On the right column or right side is showing the elevation, and so that's the black line is the creek channel itself. Down along the bottom is the river mile. Then along the right axis there is the channel widths. And so you can see in the green, which is the 1944 channel widths, and then the measured channel widths in the yellow or orangish yellow from 2012 when we took the measurements of the creek channel. you can really see a dramatic increase in channel widths in areas, particularly in the upper dewatered reach, the lower dewatered reach, and then upwards into the area that we're proposing doing restoration for this project. Another thing that has happened with the removal of the old growth forest, they also removed all the logs and material out of the creek bed so they could use it as a transportation route. And that used to be common practice back in the day. We got to get the wood out of the creeks unless we're going to use the creek to transport the logs down to the mill. And so what we have is a very overwide and simplified channel, very plain bed, and just not a lot of complexity in habitat types within this. And that is complex habitat is another requirement that bull trout need to thrive and survive. And so basically what we're looking to do with this project is do a habitat transformation. We want to change the creek channel from the top right, which is a representative photo of what a lot of the creek looks like in this reach, down to the bottom right. Basically, this is a reach that was found just upstream of our project area. And so there are still large wood inputs, but a lot of these pieces of wood that we see in our project area, we can see them move, but they're just not big enough to be stable and be those big stable hard points like an old growth piece of wood. These are second growth trees that, you know, are now just starting to get to be of size that they have a little more stability. They basically just flush through the system. But we want to change this. We want to create a more complex habitat. Complexity with flow. For the little fish, we want them to be able to find when they're in the fast moving areas, can they move to a slow moving area so they can rest and rear. We also want to have a connection between deep pool habitats to the shallower habitats, and we want those in close proximity primarily for the little fish, but also for the adult spawners making their way up. They need to have places, particularly in lower flows, where they can actually hold in a pool of cover. We also are aiming with this project with the addition of large wood structures of deflecting those high flows and moving them out into the floodplain through historic channel floodplains. You know, we're also looking to, with these log jams, to create stability in that creek channel, so it's not just a fire hose flopping around in an overwidened channel and but that way can move from one side of the creek to the other in any given year. We want to kind of hold it in place so we can actually start seeing more regeneration of that riparian forest and create more bank stability over time through that as well. So what we're proposing, on the left is an example of detail of the log jam that we're looking to install in River Mile 2 to 3. This is a conceptual rendering of River Mile 2 to 3. We're looking at placing 28 of these structures within this reach of the river to meet all those objectives and goals that we mentioned before. And the really cool thing about this, River Mile 2 to 3 is very hard to access. There's not a lot. The best way you can get into it is near the bottom end in the River Mile 2, and we'd have to drive up to the top end through the creek to actually access the site. So the way these structures are designed is they're going to be built by a helicopter. This is going to mimic the same type of operation that we successfully implemented in 2014 in the Clay Island River, where we built 9 log jams with helicopters. We are going to need to provide for 2 excavators to follow up with after the helicopter constructs the main structure. We need to drive piles because we have to have some good lateral stability with that wood. We got to make sure these things don't move, because downstream we've got a whole host of people that live in the Ski Turn Valley, and they've invested a lot of money in their cabins in the woods, and they're actually in the only active part of the floodplain as it exists right now. And so we need to make sure these structures are stable over the long term. But the other nice thing about that, even with 2 excavators, if they're just driving piles, all the material will be delivered by a helicopter. We can really minimize the in-water work where there is still flowing channel and minimize the creek crossings to the greatest extent possible with this construction method. I mentioned we're partnering with the Forest Service, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Yakima Nation. We're getting, we're right smack dab in the middle of the NEPA process. We plan to have a decision on NEPA in this fall. We'll be going out to public comment again this summer. So when that goes out, I'll send a message to everyone. Please give us some good comments for that. And all the other things are being covered or will be covered when NEPA is complete. We did get ARBO coverage for our ESA consultation for the entire project. So that includes all the things I'll be talking about beyond just this river mile 2 to 3, which was a real big win. Cultural resources in process, water quality is in process with the Army Corps. And then the other permits that we'll need to implement the project in total will be complete after NEPA. We have that documentation. And then I'll also say right now, I mean, these projects are huge projects. These actions that we're proposing in Gold Creek are huge. And we've been partnering with folks at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Yakima Nation to help find federal funding for these projects, these actions, as we move forward. But one of the things we do need, we're finding with these different federal funding sources, is non-federal match. I hope this works. I made this really cool video. All right, so I mentioned this is a larger project. So this combines with Gold Creek Restoration in Stream River Mile 1 to 2. That's the primary dewatered reach, the one we've primarily been focusing on. We're also looking at restoring Gold Creek Pond, the 24-acre, 60-foot deep gravel pit that takes up 80% of the valley. We're going to fill that and restore it back to a historic wetland. This pond, we're going to restore that as well, the smaller pit up above. That's owned by Forterra. We've been working with them, and excavated material from side channel electrical work will go in there. And finally, we're going to be supporting closure of the Kittitas reservoir bed to vehicle access during low pool to keep people from driving in and around the creek and disturbing adult fish as they migrate up. It looked a lot cooler on my screen, sorry. So in total, there we are. In total, these are the actions that we're proposing for Gold Creek to restore habitat, restore historic flows, and provide for a way to support increasing population of Gold Creek fish. The top river mile in blue is the restoration that we're proposing for the surfboard proposal. The green, Gold Creek Restoration River Mile 1 to 2, and Helly's Pond will be done together. It is my hope to get funding for both River Mile 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 at one time, so we can implement all the restoration actions in Creek in 1 year, much like we're doing in Kittitas River this year. Another bull trout project that is in the next reservoir over. That's fully funded, and we're going to start work on that this year. Then finally, Gold Creek Pond restoration. That's going to take place, it's going to be phased. We think we can get bigger work windows to fill the pond because it can be isolated from the creek, and we can get the fish out and make sure bull trout don't go back in. And we also will probably get clearance for spotted owl since all the old growth trees were removed. There's not a lot of suitable habitat for spotted owl. And then finally, the gates and guardrails. I use this map overlay. So where it's red is the access to the boat ramp. The lake bed here is a very popular place for recreation when the reservoir is drawn down in late summer. And a very simple action can be done: install a gate or a couple of gates and guardrails. But this will be in our NEPA process. The Forest Service is putting a permanent closure on this. We don't know exactly what that language will say, but essentially when the lake gets down to a certain elevation as a reservoir level, they can then close the gate, and it'll be walk-in access only allowed on the reservoir bed. They're doing an emergency closure this year, and this will probably be an early action thing that we can do as soon as we get funding. It's probably going to take us a year to set up a staging area and acquire all the materials. We could also have our contractor go and install a gate. I think this year they're going to put in some temporary, like Jersey barriers or things like that. But the intention is to put a permanent closure on it during low pool time. and how this project relates to other work that's happening within Gold Creek. So the Yakima Nation has been leading an effort in partnership with the tribe, the Columbia Fisheries, and others to actually go in the dewatering portions of Gold Creek and Kittitas to rescue fish in these pools before the water goes away. They have taken a number of those juvenile, the young of year fish, the real tiny ones, the ones that just emerged that spring. A portion of those they've taken to a hatchery down here in LaSalle to rear them until the coming spring, and then releasing them back into their natal waters. Either if they're Gold Creek fish, they go back to Gold Creek. If they're Kittitas, they go back to Kittitas. This is hopefully going to give those fish. They've been doing that for about 5 years. We're just starting to get data about in their modeling about how that's actually improving the adult spawner population numbers. But you know, the intent here is to lifeboat these fish so that we still have bull trout to restore habitat for, because these large scale restoration projects, it's taken us 11 years to get to where we're at now. And we're seeing that population starting to nosedive. And so these efforts were just kind of that emergency lifeboat to how can we save these fish and ensure that we do still have this population of bull trout. And I will say the Yakima Nation, in partnership with KRD, has actually found funding and will be building a facility near Easton to continue these efforts to rescue, rear, and release. And as mentioned before, you know, with the North Fork Teanaway, we talked about bull trout being there. That effort could lead to the reintroduction of fish into the historic ranges like Tatum Creek and North Fork Coyote. So this is just the budget for construction of River Mile 2 to 3. And so we're asking for $500,000, and this is going to be a portion of that 25% non-federal match we need for the project. We have applied for a Bureau Water Smart ESRP grant, and how these different funding sources from the different agencies work, we had to actually split out and create different actions because they wouldn't fund a project over $6 million. And so we had already applied for funding through other sources for River Mile 1 to 2. And the Bureau won't let you have any other federal funding to be in a project. So we had to split out an action, River Mile 2 to 3, that the Bureau is going to fund. The match we need is $500,000, well, over $500,000, but $500,000 from Surfboard. And then we'd also take a portion of the funding that we're going to anticipating on getting for bull trout enhancement for the biennium through WIPE, which will be close to $1 million, I think, for our projects at Kittitas and Gold. Any questions?
How's the community temperament recently?
Actually, it's going really well. I've been in touch. They've had, we've been hands off for a bit purposely through the NEPA process, but they have a small subcommittee that is focusing on the restoration and supporting that and garnering support from the community. Now, I'm sure there's still some folks there that don't like it, but you know, most of their fears are around the construction impacts. The other cool thing is I've recently been in contact with one of the other large landowners that we've never been able to talk with. They've been looking to get conservation done on their property for a long time. I have them now talking with one of our board members of the tribe, and we're going to talk about and be able to expand our restoration on Gold Creek Pond to include the river that's adjacent that flows on their property. I say it with this level of confidence because the last time I talked to that landowner, the 80 acres that they own, including where the creek flows through, it's a pretty dense forest. And they're like, hey, if you need wood for the project, maybe you could use some of our wood. And so we have been making a lot of progress with the community up there.
Land ownership wise, would this project as it's broken out here, would it just be Forterra and Forest Service, or would it involve Ski Tour?
No, just Forterra and Forest Service. I mean, yeah, we'd have to we'd access up the Forest Service road, and then if they won't give us access on the burn power, we can access through Helly's Pond. But most of this work, all the material will be staged down at the parking area of Gold Creek Pond. It'll be flowing around the community. and installed or placed, and then we just have to walk a couple excavators up to drive the piles.
Have you identified your barrel pit to fill in the pond?
We're working on that right now. It's a million, we're estimating over 1 million cubic yards of material to fill just Gold Creek Pond. And we've had conversations with the Bureau, WashDOT, the Forest Service, the tribe. We continue to think about where we can get that material we want to get. And we're also working on, what type of material we want for the project. Our goal with restoring Gold Creek Pond is not to destroy another beautiful part of the Yakima Basin or any other environment to generate that kind of material. We also want to be very mindful about cultural resources and not impacting the tribe and their cultural values in and around this place. So we're working very closely with all those folks to find solutions.
Take that on the way.
That's one of the solutions we're looking at, because if we could get material from the lake, it's very similar to the material likely that probably flowed through with the glacial times. But unfortunately, we just have to be, that's where it's the cultural sensitivities. I mentioned the usual and custom places of the tribe. This Gold Creek in particular has a high number of likely cultural sites that are under the lake at full pool, but we want to make sure we're protecting those and not hurting them. Yeah.
Yeah, hey, I was wondering how filling the Gold Creek Pond, how that will, and what the plan is there and how it will affect the ADA trail.
So the plan is to maintain all the existing recreational uses. So the Forest Service is looking at the timing of closure of the area so we can do the restoration. That will be included in the NEPA, but we do plan on restoring the same types of recreational access. It's just not going to be along a levee that keeps the creek out of former gravel pit. We even intend to keep open water feature that's much smaller and shallower. So, that is one of the things we heard through our public comment on the NEPA. So we do think we can actually create a pond that actually provides beneficial habitat for all the fish and wildlife, plus a restored wetland area. So we're looking at we're going to be working with partners on the recreation design once we get into more of the construction and seeing how things are laying out. But we'll be working with like Moses Sun Greenway, Washington Trails Association, and others, Outdoors for All, to help with ensuring we're meeting the design for recreation that meets the needs of all that go out there, because it is a pretty heavily used area. A lot of very diverse community use that.
And that's not this project, so we should focus on last time on questions for this one.
I hear you saying you're going to maintain existing recreational opportunities, but the gates and the guardrails, those are intended to, are people out there driving around for recreational use on the lake bed? Okay, well, are those recreational users going to be unhappy about losing something that's not offset?
Probably, but the tribe's pretty mad that they're running over fish.
Okay.
I mean, the lake bed is not supposed to have recreational vehicle traffic. They just have no way to enforce it. And so this is through the NEPA process. They're going, and you can still walk up. It's just gonna say you just can't drive and park your RV and have your sewer dump go right into the creek.
So already those uses should not be happening. Okay, apart from those things, all the other recreational uses will be preserved long term.
Yeah, and it will be when the lake is up, the boat launch will be open. You can go up and do that. It's just when, as we get the lake goes down, and that's the same timing that the adults are trying to make it up, trying to keep those vehicles from driving. There's actually been probably 4 or 5 years, the DFW has been monitoring the lake bed for the Bureau and various tributaries for bull trout. And there's pretty significant documentation of the vehicle traffic and mucking around in the creek, as well as rock dams and harassment of fish. This Gold Creek is closed waters for fishing because of the bull trout. And so, but they are finding it's really hard for some people when they see a 2-foot fish and they can just reach down and grab it, and they're also very easy to fish for because they're top predators. they'll go for just about anything. So, you know, it's either lack of education or just pure greed by people saying, you know what, I can get a 2-foot fish. I've never caught one of those before.
Again, this is not the project we're reviewing. It's one of the related projects down on the reservoir. So in the surfboard, there's so much going on in Gold Creek. I just want to make sure we have a chance for any questions specific to what proposal before us on River Mile 2-3.
Just a quick one, Mitch. Are the log jams also designed to kind of capture sediment to encourage more colonization of that floodplain by vegetation?
Yeah, it will encourage the sorting of materials. There is a pretty large amount of sediment that transports down Gold Creek. There's a pretty long history of avalanches, both recent and in the past. So basically how the log jams are placed in the design is to scour and create a stable creek channel, but then behind at the lee of the log jams is where you'll have that material accumulate and create more stable floodplain features.
Probably about time for just one really quick question before we should move on to the next presentation, if there are any.
Go bull trout.
Thank you.
And Mitch, this is one where it won't be in person. There's a lot of site, you've got the designs, the hydraulic models. So for the site visits, we'll do a virtual presentation. I assume at that point we can get into the blow by blow of what the actual design is and
Yeah, I
that
got
routes water.
I got to see where I do have the model results from the preliminary designs. The thing we're scratching our heads on now is coupling our groundwater model with our flow model, our surface water model, and the addition of River Mile 2 to 3. It's kind of new, relatively new in the last 2 or 3 years because the creek continues to unravel. And so we're trying to meet our no-rise criteria and things like that that we have to meet. But I'll see if we've got any new cool graphics and stuff.
What state do you have your designs at?
Right now, the in-stream is at 60%. We just got through.
So there's a lot of detail there.
Yeah, there's a ton of
even if the
detail there.
modeling still in process.
All right. Just lining up Tom Elliott's next presentation, Mid-Status Creek Watershed Riparian Assessment, and we'll be there in just a moment.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Nice job, Mitch. Reminds me of the Upper Quinault River restoration, if you've ever seen that. Very similar concept. It's pretty impressive to go lay eyes on. So I'm gonna, let's see, lined up here. You got the PDF going. Oh, that's what you sent that to yesterday. Oh, I see, you just opened that. Yep, that's fine. It's up on the screen. Where is that? That's up on there. Sorry, that thing's in the back. Can I not see it on here? I can't see that. My eyes aren't that great. Got it. I'm sharing on the screen. Yeah. Where's your hard drive on your desktop though? Yeah. So I have that phone. Oh, you have it here? Look, PowerPoint on that. Right. Sorry. Oh. From that screen.